All right, boys and girls, we are going to talk about time. We are going to review the types of clocks that we've talked about in class, and we're going to start with our analog clock. Now, our analog clock is a circle clock that we see hanging up on a wall, usually at school or at home, and this is our analog clock. And on our analog clock, we have two hands. We have our hour hand and we have our minute hand. And if you have a hard time remembering which one is which, hour is a short word, minute is a long word. And that's a good way to remember which hand is which. But before we put any hands on our clock, I want to talk about the minutes on our clock. So on our clock, in between, there's these little tiny lines that you guys typically see. And it goes all the way around the clock. And when we count our minutes on our clock, we're going to be counting by fives, starting at our 1. So we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, and then up here, we're not gonna put 60, we're gonna put 2 zeros because this is our O clock. Because when we read the time, we wouldn't say, oh, it's 1:60. We would say it's 2 o'clock for that. So that's why we put the 2 zeros up here. If I put this time on the clock, we know that it's pointing at our 2. We see that our hour hand, it's pointing at our 2. And this is pointing at our O clock. So it's 2 o'clock on here. Now, if I put it on our minute hand on our 3, and our hour hand is pointing towards our 1, it's 1:15. And when it's 1:15, we can also say that it's a 1:15. We would say a 1:15. That's another way of saying 1:15 because our clock is actually divided up into 4 pieces. So kind of like that. And when it's pointing at the 3 or the 9 or the 6 or the 9, it's pointing in a new section. So when it's 1:15, that's the same thing as saying there's a quarter of the clock that we've gone around, and it's pointing here. So it's a 1:15. If I make our hour hand point here, I'll have it point at the 4. And then our minute hand is going to point here at the 6. This is the same thing as saying 4:30, or we can say it's a 4:30. A 4:30 o'clock. So this is another way that we can say this, because this means that our minute hand has gone halfway around our clock. So it's a 4:30. Whoops. I guess I can draw in our little dots like that. And then we have our digital clock. And our digital clock is something that you probably have at home in your bedroom, or maybe you see it on your oven or on your microwave. This is our digital clock. And when we look at our digital clock, this side is our hours, and this side is our minutes. And on some of the clocks in this corner, it says AM or PM. So you know if it's in the morning or if it's in the afternoon. If I write that on our clock, this reads 2:45 p.m. So PM means that it's in the afternoon. It's 2:45 in the afternoon. Or I could write that, and that says 7:30 a.m. So it's 7:30 in the morning. Now, what I would like to challenge you guys to do, I'm going to write some times on the board, and I want you to practice drawing them on your analog clock. So we'll draw our analog clock together. Here's our analog clock. Part 12 here. 3, 6, 9. And then fill in the spots. Here's our analog clock. So I'm going to write some times over here, and I want you to practice drawing them on your analog clock. So here's your times. I want you to practice writing these times on your analog clock. So our first time, we have 1:30 p.m. So we're going to have our hour hand pointing to our 1 and our minute hand pointing to our 6 for 1:30 p.m. Our next time we have is 2:15. So we have our hour hand pointing to the 2, and our minute hand is pointing to the 3 for 2:15. Our next time we have is 6:45. And for 6:45, remember, our hour hand is actually going to be kind of pointing in between our 6 and our 7. It's going to be in between it. And then our minute hand is going to be pointing to the 9, which is our 45. And our last time we have is 5:05. Our hour hand is going to be pointing to the 5, and then our minute hand is going to point to our 1. And that reads 5:05. When you guys are at home, I want you to practice writing out times and practice writing them on an analog clock and as a digital clock so you can get some good practice in. Good luck, you guys!